Hey, so we've finally finished Romeo and Juliet, but we still have some terms that we went over as we were reading, but we didn't really go into the definitions. So this week for your Words on Wednesday, you're going to have those 6 words and you're going to define them, put them in your glossary of literary terms. So you'll need to get out your glossary of literary terms. It looks just like this. And I did these in alphabetical order, so you just are going to go in alphabetical order. You're going to write the definition and the example for each term that I give you. And then on Friday, you will have a test on all of these 6 words. So here they are. These are the 6 words that I'm going to be going over. The first word is alliteration. The definition of alliteration is the repetition of consonant sounds at the beginning of words. So consonant sounds are all of those letters that aren't vowels. Well, here's an example of alliteration. The angel's not half so happy in heaven when envying her and me. So you'll notice that the word half, happy, and heaven in this line of poetry all begin with the same consonant sound, the h or the H sound. So that is alliteration, when the words begin with the same consonant sound. So for each literary term, I'm expecting you to write in the definition and the example that I give you. But if you want an extra credit point for each term that I'm giving you, I have these extra credit point opportunities. So can you find another example of alliteration in Romeo and Juliet? So if you can find an example and you write that as well as the other example that I gave you in the previous slide, then you'll get an extra credit point for doing that, or extra credit points. I may give you 2 points per each extra example. The next word is conflict. The definition is the struggle between opposing forces in the plot of a story. So usually the conflict is the struggle that's going on in the story, or the problem, the main problem of the story. One conflict example is when Romeo, in Romeo and Juliet, realizes that he's in love with his enemy's daughter. So that is conflict because his family hates Juliet's family, but he's in love with her. So for extra credit, find another example of a conflict in Romeo and Juliet and add that to the example that I already gave you. The next term is foil. Foil is a character who provides a striking contrast or is the opposite of another character. So you've got 2 different characters here, and one is completely the opposite of the other. For example, Mercutio and Romeo are foil characters because Mercutio is fun-loving while Romeo is serious. He's very outspoken, Mercutio is, and thoughtful, but Romeo's impulsive and over-emotional. So they're 2 opposite kind of characters, so we call those a foil. For extra credit points, see if you can find 2 other characters who are foil characters in Romeo and Juliet. The next term is foreshadowing, and most of you know what that is. It's the writer's use of hints or clues to indicate events and situations that will occur later in the plot. So an example of foreshadowing would be when Romeo, right before he goes to the party, he stops and he says he fears like something bad is going to happen. Do you remember that part in the play? That was in, I think, Act 1, Scene 4. So just after Mercutio gave him the big Queen Mab speech, they're just about to go to the party, and he stops and he says, well, I think something bad's going to happen. He kind of foresees his death. And so that is a foreshadowing that tells the reader or the audience that something bad is going to happen later on in the play. So again, for extra credit, find another example of foreshadowing in Romeo and Juliet. Next, we have personification. This is a figure of speech in which human qualities are given to an object, an animal, or an idea. So these are things that aren't alive or that aren't humans, but they're given human qualities. In the beginning of scene 3 of Act 2, Friar Lawrence says, "The gray-eyed morn smiles on the frowning night, checkering the eastern clouds with streaks of light." So gray-eyed morn, so he's talking about the morning, is smiling. So mornings don't smile because mornings aren't alive. But he's giving it a human quality of smiling. And then he says it's smiling on the frowning night. And again, a night is not a human. It doesn't do human things like frown. Yet he's stating that it was a frowning night. So these two things, gray-eyed morn smiles and frowning night, these are examples of personification. For extra credit points, find another example of personification in the play Romeo and Juliet. And finally, we have the term theme. Theme is the main idea or message in a work of literature, usually related to human nature or to life. So it's the main message that the author is trying to get to you. Some works have more than one theme in them. But as we've learned before, a theme is always universal. That means it applies to everybody. So it doesn't just apply to the characters in this one particular story. It applies to all human beings. It applies to the entire world. So it's a universal message. In Romeo and Juliet, there seems to be a series of bad things that happen that they had no control over. Romeo falls in love with Juliet, and she is his enemy's daughter. And the same thing goes for her. She falls in love with her enemy's son. Romeo never gets the message about the letter because Friar John was detained and quarantined. He buys poison, takes the poison, and just a few minutes after he takes the poison and dies, Juliet wakes up. So if she would have waken up just a minute or two earlier, they would have lived happily ever after. But he takes the poison and dies just before she wakes up. So all these things that were forces that they had no control over. So we could say because of these number of the events that occurred that have to do with forces or fate, we can say that one of the themes in Romeo and Juliet is that there are forces in life in which people have no control over. What other messages do you think Shakespeare was trying to convey to his audiences in Romeo and Juliet? So think of another theme, so some common messages that you just look through it and you say, okay, well, what topics come up in Romeo and Juliet? What message do I get about that topic? So think about that, and if you can have another example of theme, then I'll give you some extra credit points. So that's it. That's the last of our terms. Make sure you write the definition. You've written the definition and the examples, at least the examples that I've given you. But if you would like extra credit points to boost your grade a little bit, because I know some of you could use some of the extra points, make sure you find the other examples in the play. So you just look through the play, find examples. There's tons to find. There's lots of alliteration. There's lots of everything because Shakespeare did a lot in his plays. He packed them full of different literary elements. So good luck, and make sure you study for the test that'll be on Friday.